There is a silence that falls over a crime scene that is heavier than any other kind of quiet. In the hills of Brentwood, Los Angeles, a home that once vibrated with the energy of Hollywood royalty now sits behind the stark yellow line of police tape. This was a house built on laughter, on creativity, and a legacy that spanned decades of cinema history. But on the afternoon of December 14th, 2025, that legacy was irrevocably altered. The flashing lights of emergency vehicles cut through the pristine atmosphere of one of America's most exclusive neighborhoods, signaling a tragedy that no scriptwriter would dare to invent. Inside, two icons of the entertainment world, Rob and Michele Reiner, lay dead. The discovery alone was enough to shatter the calm of the community. But the shock that followed was even more profound. The primary suspect was not a stranger. Anit Ronzan. This is Quiet Crime Stories. Today, we are stepping away from the noise of sensational headlines to look deeply at a case that is currently unfolding. It is a story about the fragility of family, the hidden struggles of mental health, and the devastating reality of alleged parricide. We are examining the tragic deaths of Rob and Michele Reiner and the arrest of their son, Nick Reiner. As we navigate this timeline, we will look at the verified facts, the legal charges, and the dark psychology that experts use to understand how a family unit breaks down into violence. We do this with respect for the victims and with the clear understanding that, in the eyes of the law, every suspect is innocent until proven guilty. To understand the magnitude of this event, we must first understand the setting. Brentwood is more than just a neighborhood. It is a symbol of attainment. It is a place of high hedges, gated driveways, and privacy. It is designed to keep the chaos of the outside world at bay. For decades, the Reiner home was a sanctuary within this enclave. It was a place where politics, art, and family life intersected. Neighbors described a home that was active and engaged, a hub for social causes and creative meetings. The psychological impact of a crime occurring in such a fortress environment is significant. It violates our sense of safety. It reminds us that physical walls and security systems can protect us from strangers, but they cannot protect a family from internal fracture. Rob Reiner was a figure who seemed omnipresent in American culture. To one generation, he was the lovable meathead from all in the family. To another, he was the visionary director behind Stand By Me, The Princess Bride, and A Few Good Men. His career was defined by an acute understanding of human emotion. He knew how to make audiences laugh and cry. He understood the dynamics of friendship and the complexities of growing up. Beyond the screen, Rob was a fierce advocate. He channeled his fame into activism, fighting for early childhood education and environmental protection. He was a man who believed deeply in the power of voice. The tragedy of his death is amplified by the fact that a man who spent his life communicating human truths was allegedly silenced in an act of senseless violence. Michele Singer Reiner was the grounding force of the partnership. While Rob was often the public face, Michele was the steady hand behind the lens. As a photographer, she had an eye for detail and nuanced skills she applied to her activism and her family life. Those who knew Michele described her as fiercely intelligent and intensely protective. She was not just a Hollywood wife. She was a partner in every sense of the word. She co-founded the I Am Your Child Foundation, working tirelessly to improve the lives of children across the nation. Her friends speak of her warmth and her ability to create a sense of normalcy despite the extraordinary. Fame surrounding her family. Her loss is not just a footnote to her husband's fame. It is the extinguishing of a vibrant, compassionate light. From the outside, the Reiners appeared to be the model of a successful, progressive family. They were close-knit, politically aligned, and supportive of one another's endeavors. However, like any family, the private reality was more complex than the public image. Psychologists often note that families with high public profiles face unique stresses. The pressure to maintain a perfect image can sometimes make it difficult to address internal struggles openly. The line between public performance and private authenticity can blur. While there is no evidence of abuse or malice in the Reiner household, the weight of legacy can be heavy. For children of icons, finding an individual identity in the shadow of immense success is a known psychological hurdle, one that requires resilience and support to navigate. Nicholas Criminology classifies the killing of a parent by their child as parricide. It is statistically rare, accounting for less than 2% of all homicides in the United States. Because it is so rare, it is often misunderstood. Dark psychology researchers usually categorize parricide offenders into 3 groups. The severely abused child who kills in desperation. The dangerously antisocial or psychopathic offender who kills for gain. And the severely mentally ill offender. In the case of Nick Reiner, early reports and legal filings point toward the 3rd category. This does not excuse the act, but it frames the tragedy differently. It suggests a breakdown of reality testing, where the offender may be driven by delusions or paranoia rather than cold, calculated malice. The weeks leading up to the tragedy were, by most accounts, typical for the season. It was December, in Los Angeles, crisp evenings, holiday lights, and a calendar full of social engagements. Rob and Michele were active, attending fundraisers and preparing for the holidays. However, there were subtle warning signs. Friends would later recall that Nick seemed off. He was reportedly living somewhat transiently, moving between the family home and other accommodations. This period is what investigators call the pre-incident phase. In retrospective analysis, we often find that the friction was building. There may have been arguments about treatment, about money, or about independence. These stresses, while common in many families with adult children, can become catalytic when combined with untreated psychiatric instability. The timeline narrows sharply on Saturday, December 13th, 2025. Rob and Michele attended a Christmas gathering in Santa Monica. It was a festive occasion, but witnesses reported an undercurrent of tension when Nick arrived. Observers described Nick as agitated. He was seen pacing, engaging guests in disjointed conversations, and appearing hypervigilant. One source told reporters that Rob seemed concerned, constantly checking on his son, trying to manage the situation with a quiet, protective discreetness. This behavior agitation, social inappropriateness, pacing is often a clinical marker of decompensation. It suggests that the individual is struggling to filter stimuli and regulate their emotional state. To the untrained eye, it looks like bad behavior. To a psychologist, it looks like a crisis in motion. The family returned to the Brentwood home late that evening. What happened between midnight and the early hours of Sunday, December 14th, is the subject of intense forensic reconstruction. The house would have been quiet. The heavy landscaping of the estate dampens sound from the street. This isolation, usually a luxury, became a liability. There were likely no witnesses to hear raised voices or a struggle. Prosecutors allege that sometime in the pre-dawn hours, the confrontation turned lethal. The shift from verbal conflict to physical violence can happen in seconds, in states of high emotional arousal or psychosis. The inhibition mechanisms in the brain, the brakes, that stop us from acting on violent impulses fail completely. The coroner's report cites multiple sharp force injuries. We will not dwell on the graphic nature of this, but the method is significant to the psychological profile of the crime. Criminologists note that the use of a knife in parricide cases is common. Unlike a firearm, which is distant and mechanical, a knife requires close contact. It is a weapon of high emotion and rage. It implies a chaotic, frenzied attack rather than a sterile execution. The nature of these injuries suggests an explosion of violence and overkill scenario where the level of force used far exceeds what is necessary to cause death. This is often a hallmark of psychotic breaks, where the perpetrator is attacking a delusion rather than the actual person in front of them. Sunday afternoon, December 14th, the silence of the house was broken not by the family waking up, but by the arrival of a concerned sibling. When calls to Rob and Michele went unanswered, one of their children drove to the estate to check on them. The trauma of that discovery is unimaginable. Entering the master bedroom, the family member found their parents unresponsive. They immediately retreated and contacted a family friend, who placed the 911 call. This moment, the discovery, is the pivot point where a private tragedy becomes a public investigation. The 911 operator dispatched police and fire units to a priority response, but for Rob and Michele, it was already too late. LAPD units arrived within minutes. Officers entered the home tactically, clearing the rooms to ensure there was no active threat. They confirmed the deaths and immediately secured the perimeter. Because of the victims' high profile, the Robbery Homicide Division, RHD, was notified. These are the elite detectives of the LAPD, accustomed to handling sensitive, high-stakes cases. They began the meticulous process of documenting the scene. Crime scene tape was strung across the driveway. Media, helicopters began to circle overhead. The quiet cul-de-sac was suddenly the center of the world's attention. But inside the house, the focus was on the evidence: footprints, DNA, and the absence of one key person, Nick Reiner. By late afternoon, Nick was identified as the person of interest. He was not at the scene. Investigators quickly utilized technology to track his movements. They pulled data from license plate readers and cell phone towers. The digital trail led them away from Brentwood, toward the coast, and then back inland. Reports indicate Nick had checked into a hotel in Santa Monica shortly after the estimated time of death. This behavior, fleeing the scene but not effectively hiding, suggests a lack of sophisticated planning. It speaks to a disorganized offender. He did not leave the country. He did not destroy his digital footprint. He was drifting, likely in a state of shock or continued dissociation. The manhunt ended that same evening. Police located Nick near Exposition Park, close to the University of Southern California. The arrest was captured by bystanders on smartphones, a modern reality of true crime. The footage shows a man who looks exhausted and disheveled. He was not armed. He did not fight the officers. He simply raised his hands and surrendered. As he was handcuffed and placed into the cruiser, the alleged monster of the headlines looked small and confused. This image complicates the public narrative. It forces us to reconcile the brutality of the crime with the pathetic reality of the suspect. 2 days later, the district attorney made it official. Nick Reiner was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The charges included special circumstance allegations of multiple murders, which makes him eligible for the most severe penalties under California law. First-degree murder implies premeditation. The prosecution will argue that Nick made a choice, that he had the capacity to understand his actions. They will point to his flight from the scene as evidence of consciousness of guilt. The defense, however, will likely contest the premeditation aspect. They may argue that his mental state precluded the ability to plan, pushing for a lesser charge or a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity. The legal battle will likely hinge on California's definition of insanity. It is a high bar. To be found not guilty by reason of insanity, the defense must prove that the suspect did not understand the nature of his act, or could not distinguish right from wrong at the time. This is distinct from being mentally ill. A person can be schizophrenic and still be legally guilty if they knew that killing was illegal. We can expabab of experts. Forensic psychiatrists will evaluate Nick, reviewing his medical history, his toxicology reports, and his behavior during the interrogation. This phase of the justice system is slow, clinical, and often frustrating for the public, who wants quick answers. News outlets have reported that Nick was diagnosed with schizophrenia and that his medication had been adjusted recently. This is a critical piece of the puzzle. Schizophrenia is a complex brain disorder affecting how a person thinks, feels, and behaves. It is not a split personality. It often involves delusions, false beliefs. If Nick was experiencing medication noncompliance, or if a new dosage was ineffective, he could have slipped into active psychosis. In this state, a parent might not be recognized as a parent, but perceived as a threat, a demon, or an imposter. This tragedy highlights the precarious nature of mental health treatment. The reaction to the Reiner murders was immediate and polarized. Social media flooded with tributes to Rob and Michele, but also with vitriol toward Nick. This case forces us to confront our ethical responsibilities as consumers of true crime. It is easy to demonize the suspect, to label him evil. It is harder to look at the systemic failures that may have led to this moment. Responsible reporting requires us to hold space for the victim's humanity without turning the perpetrator into a caricature. We must remember that, for the surviving Reiner siblings, this is not a story. It is a nightmare they will never wake up from. The surviving Reiner children released a statement expressing their horrific and devastating loss. They are in the impossible position of grieving their parents, while their brother stands accused of the crime. This is the double loss of parricide. The family loses the parents to death and the sibling to the justice system. The support structure of the family is detonated from the inside. The legacy of Rob and Michele will endure through their films and their activism. But the Reiner family name is now also permanently linked to this tragedy. It is a scar that fame cannot heal. Why does this story haunt us? Why do we click on the headlines? Dark psychology suggests it is because parricide violates our most fundamental biological imperative, the bond between parent and child. We are hardwired to believe that parents protect children and children revere parents. When that natural order is inverted, it creates cognitive dissonance. We search for answers to reassure ourselves that this could not happen to us. We look for red flags in Nick's past to create a distance. He was on drugs, we say. He was off his meds. We use these explanations as shields to protect our own sense of security. As of late December 2025, Nick Reiner remains in custody without bail. His arraignment has been postponed to 2026 to allow his defense team time to review the massive amount of evidence. The legal process will be long. There will be competency hearings, evidentiary motions, and eventually, a trial. The public interest may fade as the news cycle moves on, but the legal machinery will continue to grind forward. We will continue to monitor this case, not for the sake of spectacle, but to understand the resolution of a tragedy that touches on so many critical issues of our time. In closing, we return to the image of the house in Brentwood. The crime scene tape will eventually come down. The house may be sold, but the absence of Rob and Michele Reiner will be felt for years to come. They were more than their final moments. They were a couple who laughed, who fought for what they believed in, and who loved their children. It is a somber reminder to hold our loved ones close. It is a call to be vigilant about mental health, to notice the quiet struggles of those around us before they become deafening tragedies. This case is heavy, and it is ongoing. There are no simple answers here, only painful questions. If you found this deep dive valuable, please support Quiet Crime Stories by liking and subscribing. We are committed to covering true crime with the dignity and depth it deserves. And most importantly, if you or someone you know is struggling with psychosis, thoughts of violence, or a mental health crisis, please do not wait. Help is available. In the US, you can call 988. There are dedicated helplines available. You are not alone. Stay safe, stay observant, and take care of each other.